It is time to start working on the French motorcycle. Even though this bike comes insanely well equipped. I can't keep doing that. The French people have a sense of humor, right? Like, they're not gonna get mad at me, are they? I'd commit more to it, but I'm actually getting over a cold. Look, this bike has 0 modifications to it. This is how it comes from the factory, which we'll point out is kind of insane. It's so well equipped. You're probably wondering, how are you gonna do a build with this video? How are you gonna do? This is the sick in me coming out, you know. How are you even gonna do a build with this bike? It's so done up. But there are a number of things I still need to do to it before we can really get after it and have some fun with it. And one of the things that's just completely missing on this bike right now is any type of protection. I mean, we have nothing on this thing to stop this beautiful French motorcycle from just getting completely tore up when it hits the ground. And being that it's a supermoto, it's a lot more likely that'll happen. So we'll be putting a slider on that exhaust, a skid plate, hand guards, and axle sliders, which I'm sure you can see by the title of this video. Legitimately just fell over there. Which what we're gonna be doing in today's video. I like to stick axle sliders on all my bikes. Obviously, they're gonna protect the hardware that helps bolt the axle together. We don't wanna tear that up. We don't wanna tear the forks up. We don't wanna tear the swing arm up. But again, on a bike like this, they're pretty wide. And in the case of this one, we got a big old cage on here. Not that we don't still want axle sliders, but it's not as critical as is on a supermoto, where the bike is very narrow. Axle sliders are like the frame sliders of a supermoto. And unlike a frame slider, which depending on how they're built, can rip off, break engine mounts, cause a lot of problems. Axle sliders are a very solid place to mount a slider to a motorcycle. This is the axle. It's incredibly strong, it goes all the way through the wheel. These axles are easily gonna withstand the entire weight of the motorcycle and then some. Now, normally installing axle sliders is super straightforward because most motorcycles have hollow axles. You have a skewer that goes in, you bolt them on, and it's hardly worth making a whole video about. However, with the Sherco, the front axle, while it's open on one side, is solid on the other side. And the rear is even worse because they're both solid. This makes the options a little more limited. And so when searching for axle sliders for this bike, there was only one place I found that makes a set for this bike. I think they may have actually built the smartest axle sliders I've ever seen. These axle sliders come from Back 3D, and they're proudly made in Denmark. You know, the guys that own Greenland. For now. Do they have a sense of humor like the French? They did send them to me for free 99 in order to make this video. And you know, I reached out to them because they're the only options, to be honest with you. I was actually just asking them a general question. They answered my question and said, hey, we'd love to send you a set if you're gonna put them on that Sherco. They knew who I was, and this is the kind of company that you wanna support because these guys are actual riders. This is a supermoto guy who got an engineering degree and then was like, hey, I can't find the right sliders for my bike. I'll just build my own for me and my friends and then develop it, gets it better. Hey, maybe we should sell these things on the side. I love this kind of stuff. People in our community, real dudes, like the guy that builds these can probably throw it up, and he needed some good sliders, so he made his own. And they make these for a ton of different bikes. They have them in 2 different lengths. This is the shorter length, kind of, they call it the street length. I would say also good track length. Speaking of track, I do like that this is a hardened plastic and not an aluminum because tracks don't like that as much. But they also make an extended one for the stunt boys. Now, what makes these unique? These guys build these axle sliders using a 3D printer. In fact, they build all their stuff using 3D prints. I was a little concerned because axle sliders need to be a pretty tough item. So I wasn't sure what I was gonna get. I mean, I think we've all gotten, you know, little 3D prints from our buddy or whatever, and it's like, this chintzy thing. But I also know from my friend Rivet, who sells commercial grade 3D printers and has done all kinds of cool stuff with that some of the stuff he's shown me is like, oh, you know, these things can be real serious if you need them to be, just depending on the fill and the type of material. Plus, it's let them do something super cool with these things I've never seen before. Typically with axle sliders, seen me taking them on and off bikes, install them. It's a bit of a process. You gotta take them on and off every time you take your wheel off normally. It's a number of tools. Like my MT-07 over here, or TW700 as I like to call it, I have to get a very small Allen out. It's like a really unusual size too. It's one that's never just gonna be in your random toolkit. I have to remember to take it with me when I go on the road somewhere because I have to undo a little jam screw, unscrew a puck on both sides, and then I have to get, I believe it's a 5mm Allen on both sides to try to twist it, and hopefully they comes out evenly. Then when you go to bolt it all back together, you gotta try to make sure everything's adjusted in the right way, and it never is. You wanna make sure that the little jam bolt is at the bottom, not at the top, so it doesn't collect water in there. And that's pretty normal. Even DIY ones where you have to grab it from both sides at the same time. It's always kind of tricky. What they've been able to do here by 3D printing them is something pretty cool. This is a toolless system. There's a nut, can you hear it? there's a nut down inside this. I don't know if they stop the 3D print, pause it for a second, and drop a nut in there. I don't know what they're doing, but it's in there. And then the other side, I don't know if they just Loctite it in or whatever, but it's solid in there. So you end up with your rod, a fixed side, and the side that just screws on like that. You also notice too, one of the sides here has a nut shape in it. Same here with the rear. One of them has a big shape for the rear axle nut to go around. All we're gonna have to do is stick this skewer through, jam it down, and we're off to the races. And I love that. That's such a great design. It may not sound like a big deal to you, but you remember every time you take your wheels on and off, you have to play with those axle sliders. So that's what we're gonna be installing. There is one thing though I haven't mentioned yet, and that's how they deal with these solid axles. Well, we're gonna be drilling them out. A little more work with this bike, but that's the method, and this is something I think a lot of the KTMs also have to deal with. And this shouldn't hurt like the strength of the axle. I know someone was asking me about that, like, is that okay to do? Yeah, that's just them capping the end. It's not a problem. Let's get these things on so we can crash our motorcycle on our Sherco here. Looks like we have a 27mm front, and I shouldn't have to loosen any of these pinch bolts. I've never taken this axle off, but I should just be able to, yeah, there we go. So how do we drill this out? I have a drill press back there, and the best thing for me to do would be lock it in there, get the exact size, throw a little oil on here, and punch it straight out to that size. But you probably don't have one of those. So let's do this the easy way with just some normal tools that you more likely to have at home. So since I'm gonna be drilling it with a simple drill here, I'll actually wanna start by marking the center, doing like a small hole, we'll size it up. This is a simple punch right here. There's different kinds. I don't know if you guys can see that on camera, but there's actually a pretty obvious center spot on this. Yeah, I feel pretty good about that. Oh, that's like the perfect height. That really worked out. See, I had potential. I knew it had potential. So there we go. I've got it locked in where I can push into it. It's snug. All right, that's snug, and I'm not having to like smash it. Obviously, we don't want to smash it. It's aluminum. Now, you may be tempted then to try to drill this to the exact size that this is to start with, but that'd be a mistake. You want to kind of step them up bit by bit. I'm going to start with a fairly small one. Same time, though, and I'm not a machinist, so if you actually have more experience with this and you want to chime in the comments, chime in, but my experience is that if you step up, 2 small steps can cause weird things where the drill wants to bite in and sort of take off. So, you know, I like to do a couple steps, but still have a good bit of meat between each one. Anyways, now farting around, let's get to it. Oh, there we go, mate. Quick thing to do here, clean this edge up here a little bit. Make sure to go up and down with your tool to upset the internet, or do it the quick way if you like. You could probably get away with just popping the nut back on there, but let's actually do it correct. 19mm on the other side. These tools are always nice. Torque to the appropriate torque pounds. Click, click. And them up on this side. We can snug up the other side. And now we can install our toolless axle sliders. This is so cool, man. That goes there. Look at that, came right out the other side, no problem. Oh, I love that. Looking good, looking good. Onto the rear, and we need to fully pull this axle out here. I don't want to actually remove the rear wheel. I'm gonna pull the axle and try to keep everything in line here, just because with this tire in here, this 160, but I would have to like get this off. I gotta pull the chain guide thing off, the lower chain guide. So if I can, we'll just keep it like this, and I'll shove a couple of these guys in once we get it out. Big old clump of grease in there. One thing I will say about the Shercos, the linkages up there, clearly there's like evidence that they got heavy grease on it. There's been grease on these axles. So many bikes, they don't put like any grease on anything. So I do appreciate this thing's decently greased up here. Should just be able to push this out. Just kind of keep things in place. Same on the other side. Oh. So there's our nut that we need to modify and the end of our axle. This is like pressed on or something. I wonder how this is done, because this has got to be steel, but this is aluminum. Yeah, steel, aluminum. So yeah, there must be like a pressed in fit on there. Obviously we'll re-grease it. Any grease that's on it right now, what it's gonna end up doing is where all the little bits of metal and aluminum are just gonna stick in there. So the nut part is just like the other one. You get the idea. We skipped ahead. This is the trickiest one, I have to imagine, because I can't really get it in the vise correctly, and I gotta more or less guess where the center of this is. All right, where are we at? Oh, this is dead on 40. Set this thing to 20. Right there. Let me refine my mark here. It's middle-ish. I'm gonna kind of hang this through the vise, right up against there. Snug it down. That feels pretty good. Yes. She's all cleaned up and re-greased up. We should be able to pull one of these out slightly. I'm gonna take a rag, stick it into the chain, pull it in. You make sure we're tight against both adjusters, snug it down, and we can remove that. One side, of course, has the little hexy nut thing in it. That would go on this side. And locks into that. The other side just goes on. Seems like a lot of thread. We'll see. I wonder if I have to trim this down. Oh yeah, I'm gonna have to trim it down. Look at that. We're bottoming out right there. No big deal. I need to take about 3 or 4 threads off. It's possible they just don't see one of these every day. This is a Sherco after all. Pretty rare bike, so that's fine. I've got the ability to do it. I can show you a bazillion different ways to cut this, but let's go as low tech as we can. Now, of course, these threads right now, the nut won't just go back on it. So you got a couple choices. You could take a file here and try to work the edges back around, take a Dremel, work it around. Or if you have a bench grinder, you can do it the easy way. Just need to round that edge back off. A little wire wheel action, you got it. The only downside of what I've done just now is this probably had a zinc coating on it and it won't anymore, but it's inside there. It should be fine. That's threading on. No problem, no burrs or anything. So that's what we want, kind of turning it back into kind of a factory bolt would look. There we go. Nice. Now the French bike has some protective parts. It looks good. Laid the bike over on its side and looking front and rear, and what we're seeing is great, which is both axle sliders touching the ground, holding the bike up. The only other things touching the ground is the peg and the handlebar, which is what we expect. Now we put hand guards on there, those will be protected. I haven't quite sourced or figured out what I might do for some peg sliders, but the pegs, even if they do have to touch the ground and they get tore up, it's a replaceable part. This is good. We didn't try it on the side with the exhaust because it's very likely it's gonna touch the ground, but we're gonna get a slider on that too. We're gonna get hand guards, skid plate, we're gonna get it all worked out. But I am very happy with these axle sliders. This is gonna be so convenient when taking the wheels off. You literally just grab one side and unscrew it. Why is no one else building them that way? That's the way to build them right there. Check out the back 3D over onto Patreon, which is $1 a month, and you can jump into my Discord and speak to me in there. That doesn't, is that more of a pirate? I don't know what that was. With the cold voice I've got going on right now, when I start to just do a voice, I don't know what it's gonna sound like. I got up this morning and the voice was so raspy, and for some reason I sounded like Alan Rickman. I was doing an Alan Rickman. I don't even think I could do it now. Like, no, it's drinking enough tea at this point and coffee, it's gone away. But yes, I don't like being sick, but if I could wake up and sound like Alan Rickman, that's pretty funny. Well, I'll feel like crap, but at least I'll be cracking myself up. That's part 1 down for the Sherco. It's actually part 3. We've already put a bigger foot peg on there. This doesn't even bother. That's 2 bolts. That's not worth filming. And we changed the tires to the GP2 tires from Michelin. We will see you next video. Bye, everyone. This is how you professionally pick up your motorcycle, everybody. Grab it by the plastic down here. Is that it? How you do it? Get your butt in here. Get your butt. No. Hang on. What if I just did this real quick? Oh yeah, I just did that.